And I always knew as I had hot daddy, but good grief. Oh, I'll let the kiddos get situated while they're getting back there. I do want to tell a little something about your pastors here. You see, after we got all the requests for the different sermon topics and they decided to do Fruit of the Spirit, they came to me giggling, telling me that I was going to be doing faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And they couldn't control themselves as they began to giggle about the fact that I was going to be doing gentleness and self-control. Now, I don't know why they find that funny. I have no idea why. Funny, guys. You guys are hilarious. So, also, my wife had a good comment yesterday. We were talking. She's like, how ironic it is that the guy with Tourette's is the one talking about self-control when there's so much of my problem is self-control because I just say and do random things. But if you only knew half of the things going through my head, you'd be grateful for only the things that come out. So anyway, my earliest memories related to the fruit of the Spirit were a song sung by a Christian musician named Steve Green, who turned a number of scriptures into songs. And one of them was about the fruits of the Spirit. And it went, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness. The fruit of the Spirit is faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. As you can see, even as an adult, I can still remember that song. It was probably the only way I remember the fruits of the Spirit. And I loved it. I mean, it was great for me. It was fun. He was a really cool guy. I mean, for the time period. Nowadays, that would probably be considered old people music. But hey, I'm pretty cool anyway. But as I've grown, I've realized that a few things about the fruit that I didn't know. So one of them is that they come a lot harder than what I knew when I was singing children's songs. Back then, it was just cute children's songs and having fun. But the older I get, I'm like, those fruits of the Spirit do not come easy. And if you've grown in any of those areas, patience, you know that it is not an easy process for you to become more what Christ wants you to be. Second, I've learned that we absolutely need the Spirit to fill us with this fruit because we cannot make it happen on our own. Now, we can fake it for a little while, but we can't bring about the true heart change that leads to having the true fruit of the Spirit, especially in the tough times. Like I said, you can fake it for a little while, but you can't make it actually happen. It has to be the Spirit. That said, the other thing I learned is there are things we can do to open our hearts to the Spirit's work, or to use a gardening term, to kind of plow the soil of our hearts so that God can plant his fruit within us. So, hey, I got that right this time. I got that all bumbled yesterday when I was practicing. Now, as Gary and Efren have shared in the past few weeks, the fruit of the Spirit are directly connected to one another and that they build on one another. For example, you need love and joy to experience true peace. And I will help you see how these last three are connected to one another as well. Now, you may notice that I'm covering faithfulness for a second time in addition to Gary's sermon last week. The plain answer is we just had a miscommunication. So Gary and I just decided we're going to double tap faithfulness. The reality is we probably need it anyway. But I'm going to approach it from a different angle. So I trust that you'll find this a fruitful discussion. Yeah, cue laughter. You know, you can laugh at my stupid jokes. Jim. Now, the definition of faithfulness. So the word faithfulness has a two-sided meaning. On the one hand, it means someone who's reliable and trustworthy, someone who can be trusted to remain loyal and do what they have committed to do, similar to what Gary discussed last week. On the other hand, it refers to someone who believes wholeheartedly without fail, even when life circumstances may cause others to fail. Now, by fail, I don't mean doubt, because we all have doubt at some point in time. What I'm talking about is an abandonment of the faith. Because we all have times when it's really hard to believe and trust in God. But the fruit of the Spirit is we continue to hold on to that faith, however strong or weak it may be at that moment. We continue in the faith, and that's the work of the Spirit. And here you'll see a definition that I gathered from a Bible dictionary of faithful. Efren likes his dictionary.com. I prefer my Bible dictionaries. I'm a nerd, though. So faithful is a designation of Christians, and it means full of faith, trustworthy, trustful and not simply trustworthy. Now, if you guys want, you can take a picture of these verses and do some digging later. That's why I put them up there. But it is also used of God's word or his covenant is true and to be trusted. And the two sides actually go hand in hand if you think about it. Because when we truly hold to the truth of God's love and plan for our lives, it empowers us to better remain faithful in doing what he's called us to do, as well as remain true to what we say we will do. You see, one of the things that commonly leads us to break our word is a belief that we will have better results by abandoning our commitment and pursuing something new. You see this in marriages where the grass seems greener on the other side, so they leave their spouse and move on. Or someone who says, you know what, this church isn't doing it for me, so I'm just going to leave and go do my own thing or find another one that makes me happy instead of seeing what God might have there. Or if something's just difficult in general and you're like, you know what, I don't see the value in this, or it doesn't benefit me, so I'm ditching it. And you miss out on what God might have for you. Because if you truly believe that God will reward your faithfulness and will give you a better reward than what you are trying to pursue, then you will hold fast to whatever it is that he's called you to do. And another thing that leads us to break our word is fear of negative consequences. Because a lot of times we're like, well, if I do this, things are not going to work out too well for me. I just don't want to deal with the painful consequences, or it's going to be really hard. But we can stand firm in our commitment if we truly believe that God will not only strengthen us to endure those consequences and actually make us more like him, but use them to refine us and make us more capable to glorify him. How many of you have ever been through a tough time that you wanted to quit on God, but you didn't? And then as a result, you found your faith was stronger, or you found an area of your life, you're like, man, I'm glad. I hated going through it, but I'm glad for the results. Some of us feel that way when we go to the gym. I need to get back to the gym. Now, God's faithfulness is demonstrated all throughout Scripture as he continually remains faithful to his covenant he made with his people, even when his people are unfaithful. The power and beauty of God's faithfulness is on full display in the lives who serve faithfully and live in full confidence of God's faithfulness to us. I'm sure you know people that at some point in time, you've watched them go through it, but you've watched their faith just stand firm. And there's something beautiful in that. There's a power that you see when people remain true to God's faithfulness. And in the same way, we hopefully been that for someone else. I know we've had times when Amy lost her sister and we went through that, and we've gone through some various challenges, and people have come up and said they were just encouraged by ours. I'm like, I was just hanging on by a thread, man. I'm just trying to live here. But even in my brokenness, God used me in the same way he's probably used you when you didn't realize it. And there's something beautiful in that. But again, it goes back to remembering God's faithfulness. If we can hold on to the truth that he is good, that he is faithful, and we have faith in that, that's what enables us to do those things. Another aspect of faithfulness is revealed in how we view others and whether we believe the best of them. Think 1 Corinthians 13:7. I know you guys are like, oh, no, not Corinthians again. But it says, love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Not only are we faithful to God, but we are faithful to others, always seeking their best and maintaining our commitments to them, even if they fall short. And it's really hard to trust people sometimes. But God tells us, all right, we see an example over and over in Scripture where we can put ourselves out there, even when it might come back and backfire against us. But again, that's because we trust that God has something better in store for us. I know it's not popular to think this way, but there are times when keeping our word will make us vulnerable to being taken advantage of. But sometimes that is a good thing. Not always, but sometimes that's a good thing. You see, Jesus and Paul certainly allowed themselves to be inconvenienced for the sake of others, focusing on the greater goal of winning souls. Sometimes we need to accept that we will be misused for the glory of God. And that said, we must be wise to ensure we're actually doing it for the work of God. We don't just let ourselves be doormats. But at the same time, there are times when we need God to reveal to us and say, no, I want you to accept this. I hate the word abuse, but this mistreatment. I want you to accept this because I've got something in store that you don't know yet. But trust me, it will come around and it will bring great fruit. So just deal with it for now. After all, Paul talks about the trials that we experience on earth are light and momentary compared to the glory of heaven. So we can put up with it for a little while if God's got a plan to make something better out of it. At the heart of this kind of faithfulness is a divine work of God. Only God can build in this kind of faith that helps us to endure every trial we must face. So we can ask God to fill us with this faith. At the same time, though, there is something we can do to aid that growth. A powerful way to feed your faithfulness is using a technique employed throughout the Old Testament and even into the New Testament. That's intentional reminders of God's faithfulness in the form of physical reminders, intentionally recounting God's faithfulness in the past, and reading the stories of God's faithfulness in Scripture. Now, a physical reminder might be something like a picture or collection of scriptures framed on your wall, or a rock like the one Ephraim tried to bring until his girls lost it. But it could be a number of things. But if it's something that when you look at it, you touch it, it reminds you of God's faithfulness in some aspect, or a promise that God's made. It could be a number of things like that. Or recounting. My family, and your families are probably like this too, that sometimes when we get together, we just like to talk about memories, cherished memories, family memories. And in many cases, it comes back to thinking of God's faithfulness and how he's been good to us and kept us together as a family through some messy stuff. And just thinking about the many blessings he's given us over the years. This can actually be something you do on a daily basis. I've heard some pretty cool ideas from people that sit around the dinner table. I know that's hard to believe, right? We can still sit around the dinner table and eat together. But you can do some pretty cool things. I've heard families that do like high moment, low moment. Where did you grow today? Where did God show his faithfulness today? What did you learn today? And it can be something we practice regularly, even daily, because if you didn't know this, your memory when you use your brain for memory, it's just like working a muscle. And if we train ourselves to think about God's goodness and faithfulness on a regular basis, that helps us to find things more easily to thank him for. But the less that we do it, the harder it is to find those things. So you got to keep them muscles working. Now, gentleness, my favorite topic. It means to deal with gently or to be conciliatory with others. It's closely related to meekness, which implies a strength under control, choosing a gentle response or avenue of change rather than one filled with wrath, a display of power, or a need to be vindicated. Gentleness is also marked by humility. We're able to treat others gently instead of with a self-righteous attitude, because we are humbled by the reality of our own sin and the grace that Christ has shown to us. Or in other words, I can treat you kindly in your sin and your brokenness because I know how much kindness or gentleness has been shown to me, so I can be gentle with you. Paul also explains one of the ways in which gentleness manifests itself in the day-to-day life of the church. He says, brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you be tempted. That's in Galatians 6:1. As this commentator, Mr. Fesco, puts, Paul characterizes those who are marked by gentleness as those who are willing to restore with gentleness anyone who is caught in any transgression, any sin. Such gentleness is undoubtedly rooted in the knowledge of the gentleness that the Lord has shown to all sinners who have been united in Christ. And Martin Luther puts it this way. He says, meekness is when a man is not lightly moved or provoked to anger. There will be infinite occasions in this life which provoke men to anger, but the godly overcome them by meekness. And again, it's being able to approach those things with gentleness, because we know, well, we'll come back to the faithfulness side of it, but ultimately it's trusting that God will do something better so we can approach it with gentleness. We don't have to show our power. We don't have to dominate the situation, which I know this is especially difficult for us men. I know you ladies got issues with this too, so don't act like you're innocent. But this is especially difficult for men because it's our nature to want to beat our chest and show our power. But sometimes our power is greatest when we restrain ourselves and we show gentleness. There is a time for beating the chest, but it's not as frequent as when there's a time for being gentle. Actually, I saw a really cool illustration of this yesterday on, of all things, Baby Shark's Big Show. And there is a character called Big Fin, and he's this huge fish. But then Baby Shark is learning he keeps hurting all his friends because he's being too rough with them. And then he watches Big Fin, who's this big shark who can push him through lots of seaweed, just suddenly start touching these little shells and just being super sweet and gentle with them. And he's like, what in the world? And he says, well, I've learned that with great strength, I've also got to learn to be gentle. So there you go. Baby Shark comes up with a pretty cool illustration. And again, strength through gentleness is one of the greatest displays of strength. When I can beat the far out of you, but I choose to show you kindness and gentleness and love. That is, yeah, I've got other quotes on that, but I won't go there because I can't say them right. That Jesus described himself as gentle and lowly in heart, Matthew 11:29. And so should we be. You see, meekness and gentleness also brings to mind the idea that we must sometimes allow others to wrong us or take advantage of us. If by doing so, we can bring glory to God. So I don't I don't have to stand chest to chest, face to face with you. Sometimes I can choose the gentle response, take the abuse, and say, okay, God, you've got something better for this, so I'm just going to let you work through this. Now, have you ever known someone who changed the temperature of a room by their gentle presence? Or who had a quiet strength that allowed them to manage difficult situations, even changing people's outlooks on the situation without ever raising their voice or attempting to use their power over someone? I'm sure if you give it a second, you can think of someone. A personal example is there's a gentleman I know. He went to be with Jesus, I think, a couple years ago now, but he made it to a good old age of 90 years old. Dr. Melvin Steins, just an amazing man. But when he just had this presence about him, and he was smart, super intelligent. He was a doctor in psychology. Maybe that's part of the reason he could help people. And he had a lot of knowledge to pass, but he didn't feel the need to boast or to show it. Instead, he would come into the situation and gently bring up topics or questions. And he just had a way of, there were board discussions at the church that would get heated. Not that those ever get heated with elders meetings or board discussions, never. But Dr. Steins would just come into it and start talking gently, calmly, firmly, but gently. And he would calm everyone down, get them to start thinking straight. And he never had to raise his voice. But it was also clear that he thought about what he said before he said it. He didn't need to put himself out there in a powerful way. He just had that presence. He's just an awesome guy. And I'm sure, I know he said he was not always that way. And I'm sure that his lovely bride, Dorothy, straightened him out quite a few times, because she was a little sassy. I loved her. And I can imagine there were times that he came home and said some stupid things, and she said, I got to have a discussion with you, young man. But through that, he grew and became this picture of gentle strength. Now, somebody you all know is one of our favorite TV people, Mr. Rogers. I love Mr. Rogers. I didn't realize how much I appreciated him until I got older and realized how hard it is to be gentle like Mr. Rogers. I'm not wearing the sweaters, though, or taking off my shoes and changing into other shoes. But there was something about him I loved, and that was the way he could handle things so gently and so calmly, ways that I wished I could do. But, you know, there was a strength about Mr. Rogers that sometimes gets missed. For example, when there was an episode where he brought in this young man who was in a wheelchair and had some significant disabilities. I believe it was from cerebral palsy. And he did this when a lot of kids hadn't been introduced to kids with special needs. And this was a time where a lot of times those kids were bullied, mistreated, seen as outsiders and weird. But he brought him on a show, and he showed the value of this precious child and began a movement in some ways of showing people that just because someone doesn't look or act like you or have the same abilities as you, that doesn't mean they're less human. And so he very gently did that. And another thing he did, and I didn't realize this until I watched this video that kind of talked about it later on, is he had a black police officer come on the show with him, and they dipped their feet in this little pool of water. And I didn't realize this was when the pools were still segregated. So Mr. Rogers was making a statement, a very bold statement, that he was not all about segregation. And he was pushing against a system of hate and division. But he never raised his voice. He never said a harsh word about it. He just dipped his feet in the water with a friend. Very, very cool. And then my other thought on him was, I remember watching this video. I think he was getting his Lifetime Achievement Award. And he was speaking to all these celebrities who are some of the most arrogant and self-centered people in our culture. I mean, I don't like celebrities. I'll be quite frank with you. But yet he spoke to them, and he used gentle words, but he gave them this firm message of reminding them, don't forget the people who got you here. Don't forget the loved ones who sacrificed to make the way for you. And he got this room full of selfish people crying because he got them thinking. And he never used a harsh word. He just gently reminded them of everyone who had done so much for them to get them where they needed to be. Now, talk about power. I mean, that's an intimidating situation to come before these people that the world thinks is awesome and basically call them out, but in a gentle way. So that's something I love about Mr. Rogers, and he's a perfect example of how you can be both gentle and powerful in your presence. Finally, self-control. Actually, this is probably my favorite topic because it's the one I struggle with the most. So the Greek root of self-control here implies self-restraint as to one's desires and lusts. It also means to be prudent and sober-minded. Now, if you think about it, a great deal of our problems in the world today result from a lack of self-control. You see, buying things we don't need and can't afford leads to financial problems. Can I get an amen? It's true. A lot of us, now, obviously life happens. Sometimes things are out of our control. But in many cases, the average family in America has put themselves in debt because they bought things they didn't need when they couldn't afford it. And we put ourselves in bad situations because I got to have it now. Well, no, you don't. Most of the things that we want, we don't need right now. We can wait. And it's okay. When you get there, it'll be worth it because you won't have all the stress of how you're going to pay for it. Eating too much or the wrong kind of foods leads to many of our health problems. I'd love to say that I just got this dad bod because I wanted to just be the awesome dad, but really it's just because I love food. And so the reality is a lot of the problems that we have are because we're eating too much or we're eating the wrong kinds of food and we're not controlling ourselves. We're doing what's easy. We're going to McDonald's and getting the fat food, or we're pigging out on donuts because your church buys them for you and encourages your gluttony, Gary Hall. But no, but the point being, when we lack self-control in that area, it has consequences. And I know that preachers don't like to talk about it because a lot of us preachers are fat and we don't want to talk about it because we got to call ourselves out. But here you go. And not controlling our lust, whether it's a lust for sex, alcohol, attention, money, power, or a number of other things, leads to broken relationships, broken homes, and trauma. How many families have been torn apart because someone couldn't control their desires, whether it was for pornography or whether it was for power and fame and prestige at work. And so they sacrifice family time to go make money. Or you can go, there's so many stories. We don't have to go down there. I'm sure you guys can think of like 5 or 6 stories right now off the top of your head. People whose lives were destroyed because of a lack of self-control. But when we practice self-control, we control our impulses so that we choose the action which is more appropriate, more beneficial, more wise. Self-control and gentleness are actually somewhat intertwined because we need self-control to practice gentleness. I mean, it's easy to be gentle and kind to those who are gentle and kind with us, or to adorable little babies. Well, most of the time, maybe not when they're screaming their heads off. But it's easy to be kind and gentle to those who are kind and gentle back to us. But it takes some strong self-control to be gentle with those people who are harsh, foolish, or downright hateful in their behavior. Have you ever had a day where you're just feeling so good and then somebody just says something to you and you're like, I'd love to tell you a few things, or I'd like to knock you upside the head because you just ruined my afternoon. But you have to practice self-control, and you have to choose a gentle response, even if the gentle response is just to simply walk away and not say a thing. Because if you're like me, sometimes controlling your tongue is really difficult, so it's better just to shut up. A pastor I follow has shared in several sermons related to self-control that sometimes he refrains from morally neutral activities, such as having dessert, something I should practice more often, simply to practice self-control. It's almost like, again, keeping a muscle toned and in shape so he's more able to practice self-control in tougher situations. So basically, it's sometimes you might just deny yourself something just because you need to practice self-denial, self-control. It's not that there's anything wrong with what you're doing. You're just like, you know what? Let me keep this going so that when something hard comes along that's really difficult to deny, my self-control muscle is already in shape. And so it's easier for me to say, you know what? I don't need that. Let me move on to the next thing. An important aspect of having self-control is having a godly motivation for doing so. This is where a lot of people fall short, myself included. Because when our efforts to refrain from unhealthy behavior are simply to avoid the negative consequences, our self-control can be much more easily defeated than if we connect the self-control to a spiritual goal for the glory of God. For example, what keeps an Olympian coming back to the gym, spending hours practicing and avoiding certain foods, maybe even a social life? It's what? It's to get a gold medal and to get the victory and prestige and fame that comes with that. What keeps the musician playing for hours and sacrificing their social life and a lot of other activities is the thrill of performing with excellence in front of others. And again, the prestige, the fame, or even just the self-worth sometimes that comes with that, or just the pure joy of performing. And then what keeps the academic attached to their studies for hours is the desire to achieve excellence in their class or their field, to get recognized, for others to see how amazing they are at what they do. That's often what drives them. But for us, what can truly motivate us to practice self-control are the goals and dreams that God gives us, such as avoiding certain activities that will harm our witness so we can be more effective evangelists, or to see God's work through us in the lives of those we love. Maybe I choose to spend less time on my phone, or delete a video game I had to delete from my phone this morning because I was spending way too much time playing it. And we play video games, or we hide in books or shows, and we stop doing that because we want to be more effective, whether it's raising our children, or we want to be more in tune with our family, or we just want to be more available to go do things that we know are of value, instead of just wasting hours doing things that have no real significance. Not to say we can't have a little break, but maybe we need to put those things away a little more often to be available for what's more important. After all, we only have so many years. You only live once. Let's live it for God's glory. YOLO, baby. Yeah, I'm so hip. Or I could choose to refrain from expensive hobbies for a time so that the money I save can be used to bless others who have needs, or to fund a missional or a gospel activity. Maybe there's something going on at the church, or maybe I know of an awesome ministry that I want to support, and so that means I got to give up this stuff for a little while so I have the funds to give to them. And the results of that are going to be much greater than what I could have gotten from that expensive hobby. Or I may need to commit myself, I hate this one, but it's true, to eating better and avoiding unhealthy foods to get my body in a better place, because my bad health is limiting what I can do for the kingdom. Have you ever thought about that? Sometimes our physical shape is what keeps us from serving the Lord and blessing others. Sometimes we just got to suck it up and get rid of the fat, baby. Or do like who's ever had to have physical therapy? Yeah, okay, quite a few of us. And I've had it myself when I injured my back in October being an idiot. Make sure you do proper form when you do lifting. Otherwise, you'll regret it. But physical therapy, in the same way, that's a painful process. If you've gone through it, you know it doesn't feel good. But I know at the end of the process, I'm going to be more capable of doing the things that I need to do. I'm going to be more functional and hopefully have less pain in my life. Even better, get rid of all pain, though it may never fully go away. But it's worth it to do the painful process, because I know that at the end of it, I'll be more able to do the things that matter. In the same way, we may need to take some better care of our bodies so that we can be more available to help others, to glorify God, or even just live fully. Because sometimes the joy we can bring to others is just having a full life and sharing that joy with them. But it's hard to do when your body's broken and you can't do much. Again, some things are out of our control. I realize that, but there are times when we can make better decisions and control ourselves. And Paul speaks of this in 1 Corinthians 9:24 through 27, connecting his discipline and self-control to his eager desire to glorify God and enjoy his reward in heaven. He says, "Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? So run in a way such as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They will do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize." See, Paul understood that it was worth the sacrifice. It was worth the restraint. It was worth taking the beatings, in some cases physical beatings, in other cases verbal, because he recognized what the goal was. He knew that God had something better for him, whether it was work here on earth or just looking forward to heaven. See, as I finish up and our team gets up here, I want to keep my promise to show how these three fruits are connected to one another. When we have an enduring faith that leads to faithfulness, then we are able to trust God to bring about the justice and demonstration of power that we often seek. So we can approach others with gentleness and practice self-control to restrain any impulses towards harshness or violence. See, if you're a justice person like me, I really want to see the man. I really want to stick it to the man. I want to see justice served. But when I can trust that God will take care of it the right way, I can say, okay, it's in your hands. My way is not going to bring about the results that your way can. So, much as it strains me and much as it pains me, I will let you take control of the situation. At the same time, this kind of faith also empowers us to practice self-control, knowing that God will reward our self-restraint with something greater than what we craved. So what you're wanting, maybe it may not even be a bad thing, but God may have something far better, and we have to be willing to give it up to receive the better thing that he has for us. Now, that could be a blessing for ourselves. It may be that we get to witness someone else's life being changed by the Spirit. Who's ever been part of that process and got to see someone's life change? It was totally worth what sacrifices you had to make. That's worth it. So, might just feel better. In some cases, our reward won't be fully realized until we reach heaven. But it will be worth the sacrifice. I think of that old Ray Boltz song, Thank You for Giving to the Lord. Even though I have issues with Ray now, I love that message because I think about how many people's lives have been impacted by our life. We don't even know. But then when we get to heaven, how cool would it be to have these people come up and somehow recognize, I don't know how it all works out, but I would love this idea of people that I don't even know come and say, hey, because you gave to that missionary, I was saved. Or because you invited me to church and I came one morning, that someone led me to Christ, or whatever it was. Or maybe they were already a Christian, but they come up and say, you helped me through a difficult time when I wanted to quit living, but you were there for me. Oh God, I almost made it through without the tears. But won't it be worth it? I mean, seriously, anything we have to sacrifice, if it means that we get to see someone in heaven with us, spending eternity, it's completely worth the sacrifice. So here's my question for you. In what areas of your life do you need God to help you be more faithful, more gentle, and more self-controlled? Let's go.